Happy Tip Tuesday, golfers. All right, Jake. Hey, Jake.
Hi.
Today we're talking width of stance, and this is an area that's a little bit more subjective than some things. It's a fundamental, but different body types and swing shapes will require a little bit of adjustment for different golfers, right?
Yeah, I think there's general guidelines that we want to follow, but then those guidelines can be a little loose depending on the things you talked about.
A little experimentation, right? And a little talking with your teaching pro to figure it out. But let's talk about what happens if your stance is too narrow. So show me a mid-iron stance, and then let's talk a little bit about too narrow or too wide. So what are we looking for to do it properly?
So I'd say typically with a mid-iron, you want your width of stance to be somewhere between your hip width and your shoulder width. So, we use shoulder width as a starting template for a lot of people, but that's kind of the range we're looking for.
Yeah.
And when you start getting too narrow, a couple problems can occur. First of all, it's going to be difficult to have good balance as you're rotating and moving in your golf swing.
Yeah, you should be moving pretty quickly. So if your feet are too close together, you may lose your balance. I think it's also easy to get to the outside of your feet too quickly and maybe over-rotate too much. You can just move around too much if your feet are too close together.
Yeah, and when the weight gets to the outside of your foot, like you mentioned, it really messes with your swing structure and power dynamics, so we don't want that.
And your ability to move onto that front leg through impact. So then the thing we see probably more often, though, I think people want to hit the ball farther. They get a little wide, especially
Agreed.
with the driver and whatnot. And what is too wide causes a problem.
Well, it should make sense. You kind of have the opposite problem. Now that my feet are so wide, it's actually difficult to move my weight into my trail leg in the backswing and onto my lead leg in the downswing. And it's hard to turn because as I widen out my hips, I set them up in a way where I can't turn into them as well. So as opposed to creating overturn, now it limits the turn in a negative way.
Yeah, so it may feel stronger and more balanced, but it will inhibit motion. So too wide is a problem for a couple of reasons. Too narrow is a problem for a couple of reasons. Use that guideline, hip width, shoulder width, and that mid-iron, but experiment a little bit depending on your body type and shape and find something. And once you find it, keep it very consistent. If you're always the same with a 7-iron, you have a better chance of always hitting the same type of shot. Good job.
Thank you.
Hope that helps.